I'm Shannon.
And I'm Mark.
And this is Dirt Sailor the Podcast. On this episode of Dirt Sailor the Podcast, we will be discussing taxes, crime, your congressmen and women, and the future presidency at hand. Happy Throat Punch Thursday.
Well, happy Throat Punch Thursday.
How are you doing on this fine last day of February 29th?
Doing pretty good.
Doing good in this
Time
neighborhood?
traveler. Doing good in Biden's hood.
I'm not doing good in Biden's hood. Biden is dragging us down to Clown Town.
Oh, very much so.
I have been looking over various posts from the White House, and one that came out this week, I'm sure there's plenty, but one in particular was how the Republicans need to support the bipartisan bill in funding more for Ukraine, another Ukraine cash grab. And I'm reminded why there's a separation between the House and the Senate and the president. And even though there are times where I wish they were all with the same party,
under the same umbrella, so to speak,
I am also glad when it's not. And sometimes that's when it is with the party that I support too. But what I have learned, and some of our listeners may be familiar with this, is what is called the President's Drawdown Authority. So there is a presidential drawdown authority for military assistance. They can use funds for the DoD. It's something that has been on the books for decades. And Trump used it. Before Trump, it got used too. It was known as, it was first established by the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. So this is not a new thing, the Presidential Drawdown Authority. But in the past, there has been approximately $100 million that is sitting there for the president to decide if someone needs instant help overseas, they can take those funds and start to help that country or that location. However, while the average has been about $100 million, guess how much we are at for not this fiscal year, but 2022? How much do you think that fund had in it?
I have no idea.
$11 billion.
Ooh, that thing's juiced up and ready to go.
Yes. So Congress has progressively increased the cap on this drawdown authority from $100 million to $11 billion for fiscal year 2022. And the additional Ukraine supplemental appropriations, we just see tick, 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 tick for Ukraine. Since last August, so mind you, when we're talking about 2022 into 2023, but since then, the administration used this presidential drawdown authority 44 times to provide military assistance to Ukraine.
Well, and Zelensky's asking for more.
And it's never enough. And I understand that if you're in a war situation, you might need to remain fluid, but we had money specifically allocated to Ukraine for essentially their social security, their retirements, and their pensions. Never mind that we're having all kinds of trouble over here in the United States. We're helping a foreign country with their retirement accounts, not just military equipment. And they can't even keep track of the military equipment that we've been sending. They can't establish where the funds are actually going. Most recently, Elizabeth Warren wanted to have a requirement placed on a bill because we wanted to know how money was being spent that we were sending overseas, but she was targeting Israel. Yet here we've sent massive amounts to Ukraine No accountability. And the president's still acting like our tax dollars are his own personal piggy bank to send to Ukraine.
Well, I think they all do. And based off of what I've looked at recently with taxes and tax liability and what you have to pay through California state taxes and through federal taxes, and every time you buy an item, you pay taxes. When you die, you pay a death tax. They 100% feel that that's their money. And not like a book that I read once, which was their magic number was 70%. They felt they could go that high without causing a total January 6th style revolt. I think if you look at the sum total of all these parts, they may be beyond that, beyond the 70%, because we pay taxes on everything. And I actually threw a royal little tantrum yesterday looking at this tax liability and looking at our 401k and the tax rate on that, which I feel is totally askew, and how much money we have to give up in order to sustain life here. And it's wrong. What gives them the right to feel that they have strength and authority over fellow Americans and fellow human beings to pilfer their hard work in their account? I'm the one, you're the one that gets up at the crack of dawn every morning, gets ready, goes to work, provides a service, which we are then in turn paid for. But then some wiseacre within the IRS or the government decides that, well, thank you very much. I want 30%. No, I want 40%. No, I want 50%. Let's send it all to Ukraine. Let's not fix our roads. Let's not get our groceries down. Sorry, I'm on a little soapbox here, but it's ridiculous that we have to continually send billions to another country that, here's a little stat for you. As of November of 2023, August 18th of 2023, the death count between Ukrainians and Russians was said to be 500,000. I think that I brought this number out a few months ago, and basically it was just south of that. Well, now they're saying it's closer to 700,000. Okay, so what's the gain here? We pay for whose retirement? If Ukraine is no longer a sovereign country, so to speak, because we helped fund their oblivion, what's the point?
Oh, that's a very, very well noted. Okay, so if we sent, and I don't remember the particular number that we sent to help cover their retirement accounts, but let's just throw out a nice roundish number, $100 million as an example. So if we sent $100 million over there to help shore up their retirement accounts, and the country falls, there's no retirement accounts to shore up, there's $100 million that they could theoretically take and do whatever they want with.
It's vaporized and disappeared into thin air. So all we've heard, well, I'm 61 now, all I've heard for years and years is Social Security's going broke. Your Social Security system's going broke. Well, wait a minute. All of us Americans that have paid into it for upwards of 35 years. We're counting on our highest 10-year period to get a decent return on our Social Security taxes that we've paid in over the years. So that it's a double-edged sword there, because Social Security could go broke, and the extra money we had to fix our Social Security
went to Ukraine
and others in the form of welfare handouts, so they could sustain life while we become a dithering nation and we disappear.
Well, speaking of sustaining everybody else, so New York has a rule change, and it makes thousands of migrants eligible for cash payments. So as many as 17,000 migrants could be receiving these cash payments in New York City. So what are we seeing here? Foreign-born individuals who are neither lawful permanent residents nor United States citizens are coming into this country by the millions. Over 8 million, I believe, is the last number that I saw in the last 3 years alone, never mind everybody before them. But all of these new arrivals, we are giving all of these cash assistance that came out of our tax dollars. While again, they're saying we don't have enough for you to have appropriate housing if you're a U.S. citizen and you've been on Section 8, your wait list is forever. And for some people, they never get on it. They just keep waiting and waiting and waiting, and they can't get on it. People stand in line for hours, if not days, when a spot opens up. And here we have thousands of dollars going to non-U.S. citizens, non-lawful permanent residents, people who are illegally entering. The UN is using U.S. dollars to help fund their travel to get here. Once they cross the border, the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, these so-called nonprofits that are set up to help, they're appearing to be just helpers of these poor people who have crossed. They're getting contracts with our federal government to provide this assistance, including cash and housing. We can't even house our United States citizens. We're telling them that they may not even have a Social Security in their future, but somehow we have billions of dollars to give to everybody else who's not a member of this country.
Yes, and that was another part of my little soapbox argument this morning at work was, why do we continue to give these people money and benefits? I understand there's people coming up from the south, down from the north, from the east, from the west, that want a better place to live, that need assistance. Not all of these millions that are coming up fall into that category. We're getting a bait and switch here. And here again, it's our government that feels that our money is their money. And until folks from 18 years old to 100 that are still alive, breathing, and eligible to vote figure this out and all assemble as one group, not as Democrats, not as Republicans, as a group, and say, you know what, we've had enough of the fleecing. We're going to stop this. We're going to stop it now. Vote other than one of them, potentially. Maybe this new organization that they're starting might be the route to go. I don't know.
All right. I do believe that there is somewhere for all of us to meet that are getting disenfranchised by our own elected leaders. People from the left and the right, I believe, are generally together. I've talked about this before on many of their ideas. And if we could get past this, our so-called leadership pitting us against each other, because what are they doing? They're pitting us against each other, giving us someone to hate. Then they're providing us with endless sources of other entertainment, trying to get us to forget about what's going on. But if we don't forget about what's going on, they will still do the pitting.
Yes, they tribalize and conquer.
Yes.
That's how they do it. So, twofold little question answer here. Question, did we talk about the state of the economy in multiple podcasts of the last 8 or 10-ish?
We have been, yes.
Okay, so I had to go look a little bit today just to see how our housing markets were doing. So I decided to stay local, and you just talked about Section 8 people and folks in New York that can't find a place to live. Well, here we go. The median home price currently in Fresno, California, which is where we currently live, is $367,000 for an average home.
And that is ridiculous.
When that home goes on the market and sells, it generally takes about 32 days for it to sell.
And that's just for those who have never bought or sold a home. That is a pretty quick turnaround. With your banks working together, with people looking over your all your documents and looking over the house to make sure it's mostly physically sound, 32 days is not bad.
Okay, so let's look at someone's salary trying to buy that home. You can do a single mom or single dad or a couple with one income. Okay. So we're looking at the fact that middle class here in the Central Valley or in Fresno is $56,636. So if you want to purchase a home, after you pay taxes on that amount, you're looking at about $36,33 as your bring home. So the payment, excluding insurance on a house at $367,000, would be approximately $2,594.39. So that leaves you with $1,038.61 for what? For your PG&E or your electric bill, for PG&E, your gas bill, groceries, clothing, fuel, auto payments and or insurance, medical expenses, and child care if you have children.
It's absolutely unaffordable that you can't, if you're spending more than about 30, maybe 35% of your take home pay on your mortgage, taxes and insurance, you're right at the line for having issues.
Yes. So that tells me that housing in Fresno is out of reach.
According to some, while you were speaking, I was looking up a mortgage calculator. And the other thing you have to consider is if you have any other monthly debts. You may have, if you have other credit card debts or car debts or things like that, that actually brings down your ability.
Yes, it does. Brings down your purchasing power.
Your purchasing power. So you would need to have probably a 6-figure income in order for you to be able to afford that house.
So the only way to help low income people is to come up with these creative loans like they did a few years ago, which ended up destroying the real estate market because they put people in homes, unfortunately, that they couldn't afford. And over time, they were upside down. So that's when they started doing the short sales and throwing people out of their homes and that sort of thing. Then those same folks are saying, okay, well, I'll go rent an apartment here in town. Well, guess what? They have trouble doing that as well, since a 2-bedroom apartment right now is $2,110 a month, and a 3-bedroom apartment is $2,725 a month. So even a middle class person would have trouble as a single mom, single dad, or a family on one income affording housing.
It's come to the point where it is not sustainable for the average person to even buy in Fresno, California, which is saying a lot because Fresno used to be a pretty affordable area.
Yes. So yes. And why would you then, if you have an influx of people, promise them money that is rightfully not theirs, and then people that are from here, that have lived here and worked here and paid taxes their entire working lives, are blocked out from being able to get assistance?
Yes, because these individuals are going to be coming with cash money from the taxpayers. They're coming with cash to pay that nearly unaffordable rent. So they don't have to meet an income requirement because their rent is being paid for them. They don't have to worry about any of that. So they get their rent paid for them. They're probably getting some sort of food assistance. They're getting all of these assistances, as you said, for how many years did these other individuals pay their taxes and then have those dollars be given to somebody else? And you might make a counter argument that these people could become good tax-paying citizens of America. Well, guess what? We already have good tax-paying citizens of America that are getting hosed.
Well, yes, and don't make future good tax-paying citizens off of the backs of existing good tax-paying citizens.
Very good. And then you have migrants who are coming in here bragging about living off of U.S. taxpayers. There's a Venezuelan influencer who is bragging about how much financial support that he's getting. And in addition, he's saying that we should support and unite and pay the fines of another 15-year-old migrant who allegedly shot a tourist in Times Square. So we have we have migrants who are eating up our tax dollars, enjoying this lavish lifestyle that they would not ordinarily have, and then they are attempting to help those who would shoot others and promoting this idea that you can come to this country and you can take all you want to take, you can harm all you want to harm, and there should be no repercussions. And you should just be allowed to stay. You're a human, so you should be allowed to do whatever you want.
That's a good point. And, I could take that all the way back to Ellis Island and when all the immigrants came through many, many moons ago. It would be nice for a statistical person to go back and look at the data and see if the crime rates rose when there was an influx of hundreds of thousands of people from all over Europe and all over the world versus what we're letting in for free now that don't follow the law. And that's obvious. These aren't just one-offs now. It's happening on a mass scale across the country because mixed in with the, quote, good people is a bunch of bad ones.
Yes. So we have Laken Riley, who was murdered in Georgia, college student, nursing student who was killed by an illegal immigrant. This illegal immigrant was caught at the border, but then they said, oh, there's no bed space for them, so they paroled him into the country. And this isn't this individual's first crime. But we have this other thing. So CNN, even noting that this happened, CNN and their pundits go on about how if you look at the statistics, the crime rates for people who are illegally here are actually so much lower than lawful permanent resident and U.S. citizens. Well, something that I've been talking about and we've been talking about for the last couple of months, if not a year already, is that if you don't record the crime, your statistics are flawed. And in this case, as individual cases keep getting pointed out, what about this murder? What about this crime ring? What about what's happening in New York? What about what's happening in Chicago? Oh, those New Yorkers who were committing the cell phone theft so then they can turn around and do financial crimes. Guess what? They were picked up. They were let out. They beat police officers. They hightailed it to California so they can get away from their crimes. How many of those went unarrested before it finally became a big enough scene? If you do not record the crime and the person's lawful status or unlawful status, we're never going to know if that statistic is true.
Correct. They can create any stat of their choosing.
Oh, well, it doesn't exist, therefore it must be true. Oh, we don't, in California, they don't even want to report to ICE when somebody who's illegally here commits a crime, which could get them removed. So we know that people are committing crimes. We know that they're not getting turned over to the feds. They're not getting turned over to ICE. So I'm sorry, CNN and other pundits. You're wrong. Your numbers are completely wrong. So every time you want to cite that number, it's made up hooey.
Yes, it's fake. Fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
But what is real news? Speaking of where our money goes, you noted that people had to pay their PG&E bills here in the Central Valley. After we've already had a massive rate hike, but it didn't go into effect until January of 2024, and they're out for more rate hikes, PG&E has announced nearly a 25% increase in profits to $2.2 billion for 2023. If they've already profited in 2022, $7 billion, and now they're at $2.2 billion for 2023, there is no reason for a rate hike. I have just found over $3 billion going on $4 billion. Who knows what it's going to be here in 2024 that we can bury those lines with.
Well, that's a pretty expensive CEO they have, so they're probably setting her up for another bonus or another raise. No, they're really good at cooking the books too. They lie, they cheat, and in some cases they steal people's lives. And I don't mean that they actually kill someone intentionally, but through acts of, is malfeasance the right word?
Well, they did. They're in paradise.
Yes.
And what did our governor do, who, by the way, had campaign donations from PG&E? He hired the law firm out of New York to help write PG&E a nice little law to take away a lot of their problems.
Absolutely.
Help them out of bankruptcy.
And that's where I was driving down that electrical line with this, is that they're always protected. They're always covered. People that have money get away with a lot.
And PG&E, here with PG&E, we already pay some of the highest energy bills in the country, and that was before 2024's hike. They are trying to get at least $100 a month worth of hikes by the end of this year. That's $1,200 in hikes alone. That's not what you're already paying. So I would be surprised if anyone has a bill under $350 as your basic bill by the end of this year.
And if you look at those numbers, I think it's like 47% of the people in Fresno County are low income.
They're on the CARE program, and
Yes.
even their bills are $250+ a month. And that's for people who aren't even running their heaters.
Yes, and they get subsidized by us, and I don't mean that as, hey, heck with you, I hate your guts. What I mean is they've set up this system so everybody gets manipulated, whether you're low income, you're middle income, you're high income. They figure out a way to jockey these numbers around and raise your rates and do the voodoo. So it's the voodoo that you do so they can maximize their profits like they just did and their bonuses, because they're a publicly traded company, I believe.
They're supposed to give their dividends, but hey, they're caring more about that than the people who are paying their bills.
Yes.
And I know a single mom who is on the CARE program. She is a widow. She's on the CARE program. She doesn't even have their gas. She just has their electric. And on the CARE program, hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month. No matter what she does, she cannot get it lower. And I was looking at my PG&E bill. I am also not on the CARE program, but I am not a gas customer. I am just an electric customer of theirs. And ours, $250 is maybe the lowest I've ever seen, and most of my bills are much higher. We cut down as much as we can. And I started looking at our baseline, what they give us for tier 1 versus going to tier 2 versus going to tier 3 and so on. At our size of house, cutting down everything we can possibly cut down, when I was looking up what I can expect from my usage on my size of house and trying to be as conservative as possible, they aren't even giving us a baseline of a quarter of what an average house, even cutting down, trying to live as little as possible, they're not even giving us a quarter of that baseline that we would need.
Well, it's amazing. We could do 100 hours just on being ripped off by our local utility company, and how the fact that there's no competition, so we don't have a choice.
No choice, no repercussions for them, so they can do whatever they want.
Even when we thought we had a choice in going solar, they realize that, oh my goodness, we're letting these people go 120% over, so they're going to pump power back into the grid, and we're not going to get anything from them, so we have to create a fee for being tied to the grid, and then we have to create a fee at the end of the year so they're still tied to the grid.
Yes, what was that proposal? $50 to $80 a month just for the luxury of being attached to the grid, not even using.
Well, people using their power and paying our bills and creating their jobs and their salaries should be all they're after. That's why, in my world, the utility company would actually be owned, or would be, if you live in Fresno, the city of Fresno. They would have their own power plant. They would have employees to maintain the transmission lines and have people go smell gas and make sure you're safe.
Yeah, but the government is well known for its ability to cut costs.
They do a fantastic job cutting costs. They don't fix things.
However, competition, good, healthy competition could help reduce some of these costs and reduce, our customers are going to jump ship because they have someone else that they can go to.
You would think that's the way it should be, instead of having a monopoly or an oligopoly where one company owns everything, so you're at their mercy.
Yeah, we have a oligopoly with Newsom. No, with our California budget, it's not oligopoly. We have a problem with our budget. So speaking of, when somebody has so much control, then they can just decide it's not enough money, so we're going to find other places to take it from. So there is a warning now that we have underestimated the underestimation of our budget woes. And right now there's a potential for a $73 billion deficit, and that would reach quite a record. Not a record that we want to reach.
So does California have real accountants, or as we call them, bean counters, that actually count the beans for the state to make sure the beans are being spent appropriately?
From what I understand, California ranks the worst at accountability. And in fact, if you FOIA California for records regarding how they are splicing out this money and where the money's going and who's getting it and how it all is being spent, which are things, since they're tax dollars, we should be able to FOIA a record and know what's going on. California says we don't keep track, therefore we can't give you any records.
So then discount the fact that where we live in the Central Valley, you're 1 hour from the beautiful Sierras. You're 2 hours from the beautiful beaches of the Central Coastline. Why would you want to live in California when there's no accountability? We have some of the highest state taxes in the entire United States, if not the highest. We have the worst roads.
And they take our road taxes. Speaking of more taxes, our gas tax, California has some of the higher road taxes to go with it. They take that money, spend it elsewhere, and say it's not enough, give us more.
Yes, what we're paying for is a bureaucracy that we're not getting bang for our buck. So we either have too many people here, we need to run people out, we need to get together collectively as good stewards of the earth and demand that these people start taking care of our money and they do things appropriately, or we kick them to the curb.
Well, I just think we should kick them to the curb because we have asked them over and over again to be good stewards of our money, to stop all of this nonsense, and we still get a bunch of nonsense because they've been getting away with it. And what has California told us over and over again? It's never enough. The rich don't pay their fair share. We need more, etc., etc. California has the highest tax rate on gasoline in the entire United States. As of July 2023, usually for those of you who don't know, our gas tax rates go up in July. So as of July, which is most recent data, July of 2023, gas tax in California amounted to 77.9 cents per gallon. Highest in the state, or highest in the country. This state is the highest in the country. Additionally, California has the highest income, state income tax. California is at 13.3%. Next closest is 2.3% lower, and it's Hawaii. And then you go down from there. Believe it or not, New Jersey, New York, District of Columbia, Oregon, Minnesota, Massachusetts, all below California.
So basically then California is just like the Fed. So basically we'll call them Fed Light.
They are Fed Light. It's never enough, and they always want more. That's all we hear from Biden. Give me more. I need to. Where do you think that money comes from? It doesn't appear out of thin air. It's got to come from somewhere. I know they technically do deficit spending. There is going to be a due bill. It is going to come from somewhere. You can't spend yourself out of a deficit.
Well, at some point in time, when you travel to the state capital in California and you travel to D.C., you'll think that the wind's actually moving around in the town. It's actually a sucking sound. And that large sucking sound is all of our dollars being vacuumed up from all of us, put into this whirlwind ball or whatever, just like when you play Scrabble or whatever the game is. What's a game you play when you guys go out on Tuesdays?
Oh, we play bingo.
Thank you. It's the bingo balls. That's all of our money in there. And then a little door turns towards, okay, Ukraine. Whoosh, there goes 80 billion. Then it closes and then it whirls around and then it turns towards politicians and it opens up and whoosh, there's another 100 billion. So it's amazing how this thing works. You know what's amazing too?
What's amazing too?
Well, Mr. Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump.
What, as some of them Democrats call him, the Orange Man.
Orange Man, bad, Mr. Dumb.
How did they know? I was thinking about that today because I saw a picture of him and he didn't look orange. But how do they know he doesn't have a skin disease or a skin ailment or the ointment or stuff that the doctors give him to put on his face isn't that color. They're just assuming.
They don't care. They wouldn't care because they claimed that Barron Trump at one point when he was living in the White House had certain medical conditions and he was a minor. And so then they were just trying to out him, put him on blast and horrible, terrible, awful, blah, blah, blah. Look at how Trump and his son, they didn't care. They very willingly tried to attack a minor regardless of whether or not he has a condition or not. They do not care. You can watch Biden's Sundown and can't talk, barely string sentences together, and they will just say, oh, it's a little speech impediment, and he's an amazing orator.
Incredible person.
And there's no way that he's sundown, and he's definitely not on any drugs. Oh, the strongest president out there. They don't care what the truth is. So it doesn't matter if he has some skin condition, or he tries to cover it up, or he chooses to wear makeup.
Right.
They do not care.
No, and I looked back, and this is just kind of off the beaten path, and I want to get back to what I was going to get to with Trump, but it goes all the way back to the dawn of time and electing Republicans or Democrats for office or presidency. The news media has always been against Republicans 100% of the time and pro-Democrat no matter what the Democrat does in their life, no matter how bad they are. You look at Trump's lawsuits across the country, and to me, a layman, simpleton from the outside looking in, they're all corrupt, they're all political, and they're making 90% of this crud up. Okay, so now he's been fined, found guilty, $350 million. So when you file a lawsuit like that, you sue a person, you take him to court, he or she loses, they have to pay this big fine even though he's appealing it. Okay, doesn't that money generally go where? To the victims?
It should theoretically go to the victims, but in cases like this where states go after people, that's to line their own pocketbooks.
Exactly. So it's a victimless crime, right?
Because arguably this should be going to the bank and the people who were harmed by his bad deeds.
Absolutely. So that's one thing that tells me it's fraudulent. Plus you have a lot of pundits and former attorney generals and prosecutors and defenders and everybody in the legal arena are saying that this thing was cooked up, it's fake, hopefully under appeal.
They say they're going to appeal. They did ask for a 30-day stay so they could get the money together, in addition, get their appeal together, and they were told no dice. No extra time.
Right. Well, he's appealed it. It was official today. He's putting up a $400 million bond.
Right, because he has to pay the interest on all of that, and I believe they backdated it, so it's like a $450 million fine off of $350 million.
Off of somebody who is a fake attorney general, whatever her position is back there. She ran on, well, I guess she's a politician too because they get elected.
Yeah.
But she ran on taking him down at all costs.
Yes.
Well, I hope that there's enough businesses that decide, you know what, we're not going to stay. So she loses $1 trillion in New York, and we'll see who has the last laugh. But like a lot of these experts are saying, when this thing goes to the appellate court, it should be overthrown immediately.
Right. It would appear that this application of this law has been wholly different than in any other case they've applied it to, in both the sheer amount of the fine for somebody who wasn't continually defrauding victims. So in cases where there were known victims and then they were continuing to be defrauded, that's when the heaviest arm was sent on these. But it's victimless. Nobody's owed any money as of the date that they were going after him. In addition, the judge said he didn't care about the statute of limitations. He was going to ignore the appellate courts anyway. He had already made findings before they even got through the trial. His determinations on how much something was worth. And then he said Trump's determinations were clearly awful, but his somehow, even though they were his, were spot on.
Interesting thing about all this, and I'm glad you were speaking while my little simpleton mind was rolling, because there's a podcast that I listened to. He has almost as many viewers as us and listeners. Joe Rogan's show. Just kidding, Joe. When you listen to it, I didn't mean that. Just making it up. However, him and one of the folks that was on his show looked up Mar-a-Lago. Is that how you say it?
Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago. Many years ago when it was owned by another person who actually had it built. It was built, I believe, in the 1920s. And then it sold, and I should have written down the year, but I didn't write down the year that she sold it and how much she listed it for. Because the judge said it was only worth current dollars 20-some million.
Well, at one point there was that number floating around 18 million, and then there was a claim that he had a fluctuating valuation.
I really should have wrote that number down, because you would be surprised what year it sold and for how much it was listed for. So if the judge would have just looked this up, he could have used that as historical information. You know what? I'm way off. Oh, wait a minute. He didn't care.
So in his note, I was looking it up as you were saying, but doesn't care. The judge noted Trump valued Mar-a-Lago between $426.5 million and $612 million. And he he called it an overvaluation of at least 2,300% compared to the assessor's appraisal. But as others may know, the tax assessor valuation is not necessarily what the property could fetch on the open market. And if you look at the history of Mar-a-Lago, as you noted, it was built between 1924 to 1927 by Marjorie Merriweather.
Thank you.
And it was during the Florida's land boom. So at the time of her death in 1973, she bequeathed the property to the National Park Service, hoping it could be used for state visits or as a winter White House, which I guess technically 50 years later or whatever it is, it did get used as a winter White House, intentional or not. But because of the cost of maintaining the property, it exceeded the funds provided through this, and they decided to return the property to the Post Foundation by an act of Congress in 1981. So then in 1985, Trump acquired Mar-a-Lago. So what is that, 4 years later? And he made it a members-only club with guest rooms and hotel-style amenities, etc., etc.
Well, originally it cost almost $8 million to build in the 1920s. Would be equivalent to $100 million now. So there's no way that was $8 million then, and it was only worth $11 million or whatever that lowball number was when Trump purchased it.
So Trump did end up getting the property for $7 million in 1985, but that is because it had fallen into a state of disrepair, and the attempt to get more had failed. They actually attempted to get more. So it had failed because of how much repair needed to happen. And Trump put in money. He put in money. Of course, he was making money. Originally, if you're looking at 2022 dollars, $118 million was what this property would have cost back in the day. That's making equivalent dollars from the $7 million that was originally spent on it. Trump has spent millions of dollars in renovations and bringing it back to life and employment and all of that. And I get how many people you employ doesn't necessarily make a property worth more money. But you can't, I guess you can tell me that a historical site, something built 100 years ago that has been made into a resort and a brand and a golf course and all of this stuff, is somehow overvalued by 2,300%.
Correct.
And he valued it at less than, or about $500 million, $500 million.
So he wrote a book. It's called The Art of the Deal, many moons ago, which I read. And the thing for him and his dad was to what? Buy low, fix up, sell high. So it may have been valued low at initial purchase, but like you said, after all of the millions he put into it to make it an exclusive club that for a membership was $200,000 per person, it's probably worth even more now because of all the fanfare and the court filings and the lawsuit.
It might be. So they are claiming though that there's a deed restriction, and so that is potentially why they could take the tax assessor's value and apply it as the true value of Mar-a-Lago as part of the claim, because the tax assessor says 18 million. The judge isn't saying 18 million, but the tax assessor is, and there is a deed restriction. So is the judge taking that into account? It's conservation and preservation easement.
If he was willing to disregard what the upper appellate court told him to do, I would say no. Number one, he's not a realtor. He's not an appraiser. You may not be able to go off of the assessors because what? During COVID and during 2008 when the price of properties went down and the taxes were decreased a little bit.
But not as much as the properties went down, but they went down.
Yeah, makes your house worth less.
And then when in certain places that became hot markets, those taxes went up like crazy.
Yes.
So going off of the assessor's value is not necessarily what you can get for the property. And the fact that a much smaller property is in the neighborhood of $250 million, I don't think a property 4 times the size, 3 times this, what was it? Just around 3 times the size is going to go for less than 500
So why
million.
didn't they go, if they had all this information or there was all this scuttlebutt, why didn't they go after him years ago? Why didn't they go after him 2 years ago? He's been out of office for 3. Why didn't they go after him 3 years ago?
Oh, they have been. They've been trying to go after him this whole time. Anywhere they think they can get an in, they have been. And so they just have to find a favorable judge, and they did.
Yeah, they shop for the right court and the right judge. Well, they must be concerned, they being the Democratic Party and people that don't want him to win again. That is why now this Russia collusion crud, they're coming up with Russia collusion 2.
Right. Russia collusion 1 didn't really stick. It took 5 years before it didn't stick. It did stick. And okay, so I'm going to walk that back. If you listen to the Mueller report, if you listen to things that came out of it, what happened? Oh, we saw Trump's, what's his name?
Manafort?
Yes, Manafort. Thank you. My brain went blank there. So if you look at Paul Manafort and you look at people pointing to him like, oh, look, Trump-Russia collusion was real. He was found guilty. They had been going after him since 2014. And the fact that they wiretapped, they used FISA, they wiretapped and went after anyone surrounding Trump. They wiretapped an elected leader. He may not have been sitting at that time, but he was elected. And he was waiting to get sworn into office. They wiretapped him. And his whole family and everybody around, they finally got the evidence that they needed on Manafort for financial crimes having to do with Ukraine. But yet, Paul Manafort is associated with Trump-Russia collusion and a guilty plea. So you just put those little tidbits out there and you have Trump-Russia collusion is real.
Unfortunately, with the ill-informed or uninformed populace, that happens. Because like I had said many a times, if he was tied to Russia because of his business dealings, the FBI would have went after him many years before he ran for president.
With the real dossier.
With a real dossier with the real goods. Well, I hope that this Russia collusion 2 fails. I hope that he does win and get in office. And I hope that somebody like our former congressman that runs his social website goes in there and helps him not retaliate against these people, but help fix the country again so prices go down, and then they start systematically booting these people out of office, one right after the other. And like you have said before, and I'm going to pile on to that these people that have union protection, that are actual employees of the U.S. government, and not elected, I would give them the crappiest jobs in the world. I would set them in a little round room and tell them, you clock in at 6, you go home at 3. That's all you do. Don't touch a thing. Here's a little Ouija board, or here is a Monopoly board. Sit and play. We're going to pay you for doing nothing.
And instead, we get people who wish to censor Trump to make sure that he can't get any message out there because everything that he says is just complete lies, so he must not be allowed to talk. But you have people who wish to censor him 24/7, who are upset that he got back on Twitter or has the ability to get on any social media. They wanted his personal social media shut down. They don't want him to be able to debate. And if he does debate, he needs to be instantly censored during the debate because, of course, he's going to lie. And the barometer is anything we don't like and we think shouldn't be true is what they would censor. But there's no censorship needed of Biden because he would never lie, even though we have case after case after case of Biden lying.
He's a 100% liar and plagiarist. There's no doubt about that. We have documented evidence to prove it. We have video.
We have much documented evidence on him, and it's continuing to come, or continually happening, I should say. It's not, he likes to make little missteps here and there, but those are just little missteps. They're not actual lies. It's just, oops, Biden made a mistake. Trump is a liar. He doesn't make mistakes. He's just a liar. If he misspeaks or if something gets taken out of context, like when he had heard in a meeting that they were working on light therapy to try and get rid of basically sickness in your body. And they were trying to do UV light therapy where they would take the blood out, send it through the machine and put your blood back in. So he's hearing 10,000 things while he's there in the White House. And so during one of the many press conferences that Trump did, which Biden doesn't do, he talked about how I believe he said it bleaches your blood. So he's trying to explain how it cleans your blood and takes the sickness out. And instead it comes into Trump tells people to inject bleach into their body.
And I recall that, and he never said that. And hey, you know how to get rid of Alzheimer's?
How?
Kick him out of office.
Gone. But here we are again. So speaking of running, we technically still have other people who are running for president. And that includes Nikki Haley.
Loser.
She did. She lost in South Carolina. She's still saying, I'm hanging on. Well, she is hanging on because she has a lot of Democrat donors who are actually keeping her floating. So it is thought that the reason why she's hanging on so long is she's going to switch to a third party. And if she runs as a third party, the Democrats are essentially paying her to siphon off votes from Trump.
100%. And if you flip my notes over here, it says exactly that the only reason she is staying in is because she, along with others, want to try to prevent Trump from another term. And how do they do that? You have Mr. Kennedy siphon off some votes. You have Nikki Haley take some votes. And then you have people that'll vote other or just not vote.
Not at all.
And since the split is around 29% Democrat voters in America, 29% Republican, and the remainder are independents, this thing could go either direction.
It could go wild.
You know what else is wild?
What is wild?
Drinking and driving.
It is very wild.
And how much trouble you can get into at the blink of an eye.
Yes.
And I wanted to go local again. Not local. Because here locally, we had another DUI checkpoint this past weekend here in Fresno County. And 9 people were arrested for suspicion of driving under the influence. And I guess they say DUI or driving under the influence because it could be drugs, alcohol.
You could technically be driving under the influence of being tired.
Yes, and having fatigue. Well, I didn't realize that I've never been arrested for DUI, but I did not realize that the fines were this high. So if you are a first-time offender, the potential fine is $13,500, first-time offense, and a suspension of your license. And I also didn't realize that the money we pay in taxes to support PD doesn't pay for these DUI checkpoints.
Do they get to keep those fees, those fines?
They're paid for by grant money.
Oh.
So there's grant money that comes about that allows them to do more. So the news article said they're going to do multiples of these checkpoints this year to try to make people out there in Fresno land safe. So, which is a good thing. Because, we all go out, we get with friends, we have a drink, we have another drink.
We think we're fine until we're not.
We think we're fine until we're not. You get in a car, you start driving, you're fine, and then you have a blackout moment, or you're drunker than you think or thought you were, and then in the blink of an eye, it goes sideways.
So California, I believe, is the one that wants to pass a law that cars, after so many years from now, have to have essentially DUI checkers. So when you're driving inside the car, it has to have a system to be able to check if there's alcohol. So there was question as to, well, what would happen if you are the sober driver for your drunk friends, or you're an Uber driver for drunk people? What would happen? Would it sense in the car that there are drunk people, so the car would stop because it's not safe?
I think it's a device you have to blow into.
You would have to blow to make it.
Seat.
Well, I know they put interlocks, but I'm wondering if they would do that to a rental car.
You could still circumvent that, because what if you get
can
in
have
the
the
car to
passenger
drive
do
and you
it.
have the passenger blowing
You have a
it
kid
for
do
you?
it. Yeah, So I was wondering, would they put it on the steering wheel, senses it in your hands, when you sweat something out or whatnot. Anyway, so I could see potentially why they may do that, make us stop every bad thing we could ever do. And we have Uber and Lyft, but I also understand people don't make the best of choices if they are drunk. Oh, I'm still sober enough to drive, so I can go and do this.
Yes.
But it is a hefty fine, and it will mess up your life. You have other options. Call your sober friends.
In a second, or drink at home.
Drink at home. Party at home. It's cheaper anyway. Never mind the DUI.
Yes. So I kind of tried to look at the world today. North America, Canada, obviously, Mexico, and areas in between. So I saw an interesting an article about Canada today, because I know diseases are on the rise, and this kind of ties into all the people we're bringing up from all sides of the border, and they may not have had inoculation programs, and they couldn't afford it, whatever. Well, in Canada, syphilis is on the rise to nearly 14,000 cases. That's a 15-fold increase from 5 years ago. And one of the root causes a person from a clinic feels is causing this is social media and date sites online, and people's sex habits have changed the last 5 years.
Well, we've told people all the time, anytime, have no qualms, be open with everybody, but there are consequences or potential consequences to that choice of lifestyle,
which
we are seeing.
They're bearing the fruit, so to speak, up there in Canada. So that's my little Canada clip. Now let's go down to Mexico.
Let's go to Mexico. I got my passport.
This is a very interesting one, because this is going to tie into something you said about growing hay in Arizona.
Oh, yes, with the Saudis growing.
Yes. So Mexico
alfalfa.
City is facing, and this is Mexico City, a severe water shortage, and could be dry in just a few months. So there's approximately 22 million people that live in Mexico City. So, do you know the history behind Mexico City and what it used to be called?
I do not.
So, listen to my paper, because I didn't put it on my iPad. Flip the page. So 60% of Mexico City's water comes from aquifers. The remainder comes from outsourcing, and it's pumped up the hill because Mexico City is a high altitude city. Well, believe it or not, because of the overuse of the aquifers, the ground is actually shrinking 20 inches a year.
Whoa.
That is the mathematical number. So The crazy thing is, like I said, the city's high altitude. It was once the location of the Aztec city of Tenochtitlan, a city founded on an island on a lake. Guess who came in and took it over? Was it the evil Americans?
Spaniards?
No. Yes, we were not around then, so to speak. The Spaniards took control in 1521. They decided to tear down the city and they drained the lake because they felt the soil was so rich with minerals that they could farm it and they could extract minerals out of it. Hence, the water's gone from the surface. It's not able to percolate down into the aquifers only through rain, which they've had a drought, which we'll get into global warming and all that, because that's, some people say it's overpopulated. Others say that it's global warming and global whatever, but I don't buy any of it until we get into the empirical data, which is 22 million people is too many people for a small space like that. So let's springboard down to Arizona and the Saudis, who've bought 25 miles of property to grow hay because they have water issues in their homeland.
So they picked a desert.
Do you know why?
Why'd they pick the desert?
They have prehistoric aquifers in Arizona that had, hence the term had, a lot of water. However, these particular aquifers do not have the ability to recharge and regenerate.
And so something that they've now put on the locals there is no new houses can be built in which you're putting in a well.
And they are sucking those aquifers dry as we speak right now.
So why is it we allow a country, people of a foreign country, to come in, buy up the land, and then turn around and use it for something that is going to harm the population as a whole?
Correct. Why?
Here we are, foreign nationals harming U.S. citizens, lawful permanent residents, and other people who are legally authorized to be here.
Yes. Money, money, money. Follow the money trail. So as I grab my beautiful little paper here, let's go around the world. So we've gone north, we've gone south, I want to go to Australia as well. And I'm going to Australia and China. I got to flip my page one more time. Because I thought China was almighty, all-powerful because they now have the largest navy in the world. Everybody thinks they're going to go kick Taiwan's butt. They're going to come and kick our butt at some point in the future.
They might be, but...
Guess what?
What?
China's economy is teetering and on the absolute verge of collapse. I'm gonna kill 3 birds with one stone here, metaphorically. So their military has grown, so they're spending a lot of money there. Their real estate markets blew up the last 5 years, but unfortunately, it's crashing down, and there's 1 million open apartments in China. 1 million.
That's a lot.
Let's send homeless from around the world there and have them occupy those 1 million.
Oh, they're sending the Chinese to our southern border and coming up.
Yes. Well, the fear where I'm going with this is the fear of China being so big and warring with everybody and taking everybody over. Australia has that same fear. That's why recently they've started building up their military. They're doing new ships, new technologies. They want to be ready in the event that something global happens. The only issue is it's a conflict for them because one of their biggest trading partners is China. So they're trying to reconcile that. And how do you tell China, yes, we're building up our military in case we have to fight against you, yet you're my largest trading partner?
Well, you better figure out where you can get everything else from, or your people are just going to have to do without. But we're going to have the problem too, because how much of our stuff comes from China? A whole lot of it. So we would also have to be willing to forego a lot of things in order to get into a war with China. But what has brought faltering countries out of the brink?
War.
So I still think we could, if we could see them go to war before they collapse in an attempt to try to stop the collapse.
Yes, and this is where the problem lies, is just like Ukraine and Russia. So let's do a little, not role playing, let's do a scenario. So Trump does win. He gets into office. One of the tasks that he's going to have to try to accomplish is negotiate with Russia and Ukraine to bring this thing to an end. He has to make it look like they both win, like there's a win on both sides. He can't elevate Russia and make them look good, and we can't let Ukraine as a, quote, sovereign nation fall, because they're pretty much one of the only independent nations in that region. So that's one of his issues. Number two, then he's then going to have to dive into China and slow their military progress down, and he's going to have to do it somehow. Then he's got to go over to the Middle East now again and try to broker something with Israel and the Palestinians and the Saudis and the Jordanians and them little tantrum thrower Houthis and the Syrians over there in Syria. So whomever the next president is, hoping it's Trump, they have their hands full. 100% have their hands really full.
Yeah, who really wants the job? But we're going to see, I mean, Trump is still going for it. He hasn't pulled out. He hasn't stopped running despite all of these attacks on him.
So do you think you want an 81-year-old man to win again, and then he would be until he's 85? He already has cognitive decline. Then you have his number two person who, you know, I guess...
Can't think her way out of a paper bag.
For somebody, does she really have a law degree?
She does. She has a law degree, and she was California's number one honchess. I don't know. I want to say honcho, but
so
honcho.
Then maybe
Sancha.
you put somebody in a different position like that, and they just lose their stuff. I don't know, but I don't want either one of them negotiating with a nuclear power like that during a potential time of war.
No, I don't want them either. Watching Biden, watching her, watching Pelosi, and I understand Pelosi's not our number three anymore, but watching these individuals who should be at retirement homes continue to be played as puppets. They're not really the ones in charge, so we don't know who we don't know. It needs to stop, and we need to know who's in there and who's really running the show and what their real stances are and where America's going.
You know who's running the show.
Obama.
I just sent you something.
Obama's,
it says Obama's third term. And if Biden would win, it would be Obama's fourth term.
Yes.
And I made that comment to somebody at work last week before that little article even came out that I sent you, that he's 100% running the show, him and Valerie Plame and his side, and he has absolutely sent a wrecking ball through this country. And it may not be repairable.
So outside of war, outside of these bigger picture things that we're talking about, let's break down some of the things that are happening inside of our country and across the country. One of the things, our favorite place to visit, Hawaii, they are looking at adding a $25 climate tax. It's more of a tourist tax, really, but they're calling it a climate tax, and there's a reason behind that, and that reason is technically we're all supposed to be allowed to go to each other's states without being taxed or feed to go in. We're supposed to have these reciprocal, so they have to call it something else. They already have high tourist tax at the hotels and things like that, but now they want to have another tax, which is anyone who comes to visit, $25. And that's supposed to take care of paradise.
Well, you know, it'd be nice about that, because I know that a lot of locals want to separate from the U.S. and be a sovereign nation again. Like I always say, we should do a test. They should test with one of the islands. Go 100% independent. Let's pick
Molokai.
Molokai. There you go. It's not real big. There's not a lot of tourism on it, but let's Separate it 100%. No financial checks to anybody, even if they served in the military or they're a U.S. citizen and they have a pension, any of that, all gone. Let's do a 1-year test, 2-year test, whatever. Let's see how they're able to regroup and become their own nation. If they can start trading with other countries, even if they want to trade with the U.S., if they want to barter with the other islands, see how it works.
Do it.
But I will pay the $25.
So you can go there.
100%.
So another topic that has been really big on my heart, something that I am very big on, which is supporting girls, supporting women, supporting my girls, supporting the future of having women-only sports or women-only places and having men-only sports, men-only places. I'm not talking about segregation in that sense, but I am talking about how there are physical differences between men and women. And we've seen it in girls basketball. There was just a girls basketball game in which 3 players were very physically harmed by a boy playing on the girls team. They were injured to the point where they had to be taken out of the game. And so that is something that's really big on my heart, is making sure that girls still have space to be girls. And in another area, also having parents have the right to raise their children. So if they want to affirm that their child is now a boy, or affirm that they're now a girl, or help them live a certain lifestyle, I believe that they can help their child in the way that they know best. Now, if they believe that their child is confused about their gender and they want them to get, maybe they need psychological help for a variety of reasons. It's not just that they think they're the opposite sex, but maybe they believe that they don't belong in their own body. They may need help to work through that. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to change genders, but they need help. Parents can know when their child needs help. Now, there was a case in Indiana where a child was removed from their home because the parents used improper pronouns. So a Catholic couple in Indiana is asking the Supreme Court to hold the state accountable for keeping their child out of their home after they declined to use his chosen name and pronouns. And so it is said that this couple was investigated by Indiana officials for refusing to refer to their son using pronouns and a name consistent or inconsistent with his biological sex. But they were seeking help for their child. They were attempting to see what is going on. Is there something else going on here? Let's go get the professionals involved. It's not like they were locking the kid in the bedroom and telling them they can never come out again. They were attempting to get true medical help for their child. But when they did, so they get investigated for child abuse because there was a disagreement on the child's gender identity and their religious beliefs. They are Catholic. So upon completing the investigation, the state determined the allegations of abuse against these parents were unsubstantiated, not abusing this child. But they argued that the disagreement over gender identity was too distressing for the child, and therefore the child should be removed from the home. There's no abuse, non-abusive, but because you won't use their pronouns, your child is gone. So they kept the child away from loving parents because of their religious beliefs. Catholics believe you are born of your gender and God beautifully and wonderfully made you as who you are. No abuse, no neglect, and removed from the home.
So, what scientists do you go to figure all this out? The reason I ask you that, what is a chromosome? What are we?
So we are made up of genetic markers that tell us what our hair color is going to be, what our eye color is going to be, maybe how big our nose is, how small our nose is, how big our ears are, how long our hands are, how long our legs are, what our height's going to be. It's more than just that.
So what is XX?
XX is generally accepted as female chromosomes.
What is XY?
Generally accepted as male chromosomes.
Okay, so I read an article yesterday said, oh no, there's multiples. There's XXX, there's XXXXXY.
So to that regard, we have noted in our history that there are also people born intersex. Their chromosomes aren't exact, are not XX, XY. And so they may be born physically looking a little bit different than, say, a male or a female despite their chromosomes. Or their chromosomes may have made an extra, just like individuals with Down syndrome. There was a printing error, so to speak. They're not an error. They're beautiful, wonderful kids.
In a chromosome or a DNA marker?
In a chromosome.
Okay.
So in your DNA, there's a little error. Sorry, a little error there. And you can still end up with a spectrum, being on a spectrum if you have Down syndrome. Some are very high functioning and some are less functioning. So you still can get a spectrum. And so going back to intersex, this is a group of people who make up less than 1% of the population.
Yeah, it's 0.0043 or something like that.
And in my opinion, people who are trying to take over that X on the birth certificate, so you have female and you have male, and they've been allowed to put X on there. People who don't want to name their kid as boy or girl and taking over that X or putting it on a driver's license, they're actually stealing from people who it really applies to.
Right. And see, that's where I always tell you, I never want to offend anybody in this realm because I still don't know what I don't know. I don't understand it all. But I do know that in your chromosomes, in your DNA markers, in your makeup, nowhere in there does it say you're a they or a them. Okay? Those are just words. It's a word salad.
Yes.
It's just made up. And I don't disrespect somebody for wanting to do that, but when somebody wants to do that, don't get PO'd. Don't get upset when somebody that should have the exact same rights as you doesn't want to use that.
Well, so something that we do in different states, we have different levels of politeness. It's not something we typically see here in California. I guess we're not as polite, but if you go to some southern states, starting from a young age, kids are taught to say sir and ma'am. Everywhere you go. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Ultra polite. It's considered ultra polite. So now we're trying to say that politeness is actually impolite. That you can't look at somebody and know their gender, but at the same time, you need to figure out their gender without ever having talked to them, without even knowing them, and make the right word choices.
Sure. Not going to happen. And at some point in time, people are going to get tired of this because you're supposed to have equal rights under the law, equal rights as a God-given person. And you cannot allow 0.25% of a population to make this decision for you. Then you have another 1/4 making another decision for you, where you basically get all your rights blown out of the water when all you want to do is say, yes, sir, yes, ma'am. You want to do things like what you feel in your heart and your mind is a normal person. Somebody else feels out of that realm. That's theirs, but don't push your beliefs on me, and I won't push my beliefs on you.
Yeah, it says, just to bring it into a real world, what happened in my family, one of my children was getting a lot of this from, we'll just call it public sources, on gender identity, using pronouns. Are you a he? Are you a she? You're supposed to either know or ask. And so all of this, like use of pronouns, you can see it on people's name badges: she, her, he, him, they, them, she/they, etc. So she was getting a lot of this of not assuming you're supposed to ask. You can't assume that just because you look like a boy that you identify as a boy. And so she was getting this in the public sphere, and I didn't realize just how much she was picking up on. We go to Costco. We're going through the checkout line, and normally at Costco, you have the person who's physically scanning your items, and then you have the person who helps them to organize. They'll ask if you want a box and put everything, organize it. So my daughter gets up there and sees an individual who, to me, very clearly looks like a girl. They may have very short, she has very short hair, but body-wise, you can look at her body and I could see that she was a girl. However, in the world of not assuming, my daughter looks right at her and says, "Are you a boy or a girl?" She was a little hurt by being asked that, and she kind of stuttered like, "Oh, I'm a girl." And so then my daughter carries on as if the rest of life is going good and, "Oh, thank you," and saying, she's really helpful. But she had to know, she had to ask. But this individual found it offensive to get asked, "Are you a boy or a girl?" Right. And the gal at Costco handled it very well. And so I explained, look, she's getting it a lot that you have to ask people nowadays. And so it actually, this attempt at not being offensive became offensive. So there's really no way around it.
And
you're going to offend everybody all the time.
Yes, because you're going to put so much pressure on society. They're just going to lock up and just not say anything to anybody. So then you'll have people that will say, "Oh, well, that person's rude because they didn't acknowledge me or didn't ask. Hey, are you this? Are you that?" Or crazy.
Yeah. So continuing on, nice little segue of things that are happening in this country. The Supreme Court has rejected an appeal from Marjorie Taylor Greene and other GOP lawmakers because Nancy Pelosi fined them during the mask mandates that were handed down in Congress. So in Congress, they were told they had to wear a mask or they could get fined. And so Nancy Pelosi started issuing fines. The Supreme Court said, "Sorry, we can't actually do anything about this because your law's there on that little sovereign piece of dirt. You're not subject to the Supreme Court in this regard." That comes from Nancy Pelosi. So they are subject to the fines.
Ooh.
Another thing that's happening here in the United States, there is a individual who killed in New York. They are the alleged Soho hotel killer. The Arizona DA says that she will not extradite to New York because she's afraid they're going to let him out. So the man is suspected in the beating and strangulation death of a Queens woman inside a New York City hotel. And this person has been arrested in Arizona where he has been charged with 2 stabbings there. 26 years old. And Arizona wants to keep him because they're claiming that they're afraid if they extradite just another person on the street.
Oh, Arizona. I wonder, man, you just got me thinking of all kinds of stuff. How the border would be right now if Sheriff Arpaio was still in charge.
That would be interesting to see what Arizona
because he would help lock it down. Yep.
Yep. He did a pretty decent job even for some of his negative attributes. But so I just brought up New York. Another thing that's happened. So I bring up New York because an Amazon driver has been charged after fending off a drunk, lewd migrants attack. So he's out there showing his whole body parts, let's say, and acting inappropriate in public. And this Amazon driver says that he ended up in response because this person's like, "Hey, stop doing, like, I'm going to call the cops. Stop doing that." And the Amazon driver ends up hitting this individual over the head with a piece of ice because he was charged at. So the drunk guy charges at the Amazon driver. He takes a piece of ice because it's cold in New York and throws it, hits him in the head. So this New York City Amazon driver has been charged by police after he tried to fight back after this drunk illegal immigrant exposed himself and tried to, missed this part, tried to steal packages from the worker's van. Yet the Amazon driver gets arrested. So why do you think Arizona doesn't want to let an individual get extradited?
Because the movie Escape from New York is becoming more reality than one would have thought.
So a couple more things I want to bring up.
Okay.
There is a new docuseries out there that exposes the cruel and unusual punishment of housing men who identify as women with female inmates. This independent women's forum is producing the series called Cruel and Unusual Punishment, the Male Takeover of Women's Prisons. I haven't watched it. I am going to watch it. But forcing biological women to share facilities with transgender women. These are men in California. All you have to do is say, I'm a woman, and they start the process. You don't have to physically change anything. And there have been numerous assaults, numerous attacks, very big problems. So if you're interested, it's coming out. Highly recommend it. One of the big ones being here in the Central Valley out of Chowchilla, there's many stories that have come out of Chowchilla and the women's prison there. So I would recommend looking it up, watching it.
Wow.
It's a hill that, I guess you can say it's the hill that I die on. It is the hill that I am definitely, I want a better, I don't want my kids to go to prison. I want a better future for all women. And sometimes women do end up in prison, and they have the right, they still have rights inside of prison.
Yes.
They don't lose the right to their body, etc., because of silly policies in California and across the United States. Lastly, something our Congress can do that regular folk cannot. A man in the United States is accused of making $1.8 million from listening in on his wife's remote work calls.
Is that insider trading?
It is. Regulators charged this individual with insider trading in a case that could fuel arguments about working from home.
But Congress can do it and we can't.
Yes, Congress is absolutely welcome to insider trade with all of this wonderful knowledge that they get from people who get called in front.
Is it insider trading when they write the laws?
I guess that's just daily trading, normal life trading.
It's normal life. It's normal life for a public servant to go in making $100,000 a year, we'll say, and then coming out a multimillionaire. Boo-hoo.
This has been a podcast produced and edited by the Dirt Sailor Duo. Mark and Shannon are a father-daughter team who both served in the United States Navy. This production is protected by copyright laws. Until next time, anchors away.